Well, good morning again to all my amazing friends, of course, on the Wisdom Audio app, but on the Stories That Inspire Us Facebook page. Today, we have an amazing guest on the author series. She is the author of the book, I See Me. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions for this amazing guest. So welcome everyone. My name is Janice Malolo, your host of Stories That Inspire Us. And today I want to welcome my guest, Philippa Robinson. Welcome to the Stories Podcast.
Hi, Janice. It's great to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. Now, I've written a lot of notes because obviously I love to read, and doing the author series on the Stories That Inspire Us podcast, I've been so blessed, and I really love, excuse me, diving into all the books that I've received. And I just want to start out by saying, I absolutely loved your book. I'm about halfway through it. And what I loved, one thing, is that you really shared from a very personal, very raw standpoint and your journey from less than to enough. That really stood out to me because you started your story, of course, with talking about your childhood. Can you first kind of give us a little bit of the backdrop and chat about what you felt, especially when you wrote those words, journey from less than to enough?
Yeah. Thank you for reading it. Or I know you've read half of it, but thank you. It's really lovely to talk to somebody who's read it. It's interesting. When I finished therapy, I was in therapy for 3 years, and when I finished, I just knew that I was going to write it. I think maybe a lot of people leave therapy and say, oh, I'm going to write my story. But I'd been wanting to write my story for a long time, for probably about 20 years. And I've started a few times before, but it's never felt right. Whereas this time, it felt right, and it happened this time. And I think that is because I felt enough. And I could still write, so I could write it, because up until then I'd still felt very much less than and not enough. So yeah, I mean, I do talk very candidly about things that have happened in my life. I only talk about mainly the people who aren't around anymore. The people who are still alive, I don't really talk about. So there are other stories that I haven't written about. I grew up with quite young parents, and I mean, they weren't super young, but they were 21. They both got married, I think, because they wanted to leave their respective homes. This was the late 60s. And I came along reasonably quickly in their marriage. And, it didn't suit either of them, really, to be married with me. And then my brother came along 2 years later. And for different reasons, it didn't suit them. I think my mum found it quite tying and boring, and would have much rather have been out living in the world, but didn't feel like she was allowed to leave her family home without getting married. And my dad, it turned out, he didn't really realize, but once he was married and had children, realized he was actually gay. So they split up when I was about 5 or 6, about 6, I think. I mean, the timeline is a little bit fuzzy because there's nobody around now who can confirm it. So they split up when I was about 6. I obviously didn't know what was going on at the time, but I just knew that my dad had gone, and I really, I had a real connection to my dad. And also, I was then left with my mother, who was an alcoholic. Me and my brother were left with our mother, who was an alcoholic. She remarried quite reasonably quickly. And then, we were all moved to a different place, and 2 more boys came along afterwards. And I just always felt unsafe. I definitely didn't feel safe in that new home. I felt like I was a reminder of the first marriage. I was in the way. I wasn't really wanted. I wasn't really loved. I don't suppose anybody actually ever really said that to me. I don't remember that being said, but that was very much the feeling I got. And, you know, that started really young, and that's where the less than started, and it just grew and grew and grew.
And there's so much behind the title of your book, I See Me.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I received the digital copy of your book, and I'm of course not able to, you know, typically I would show the book. I'm not able to do that, but I do have the digital copy. And what, do you have a copy with you? Oh, perfect.
I know it's probably backwards, but
No, actually, I can see it perfectly. I See Me. And
yeah.
it's a beautiful cover, by the way, with
Thank
an
you.
I in your name, of course. And
Yeah.
one thing too that really stuck out to me is you wrote a little something, and if it's okay with you, I am going to read it. This book is from little Philippa, my inner child, who always knew I was in there and refused to let me die. That's pretty point on, very significant. Wow.
Oh, that's the first time anybody's actually read that back to me. That's quite a moment. Yeah.
It is, because you really showed what you were going through in such a way as it was if you were obviously transported back to time when you were obviously writing this book. And I felt like you obviously were talking to the younger version of you, and you were acknowledging that, and now saying, I refuse to let me die. That's pretty, very poignant, very stand out. Now, oh, you're so welcome. Another thing that captured my attention, as this whole book did, I just find it so fascinating. And, you know, I'm reading it on my computer and I'm like, oh my God, you know, I keep reading, is when you were describing your young parents and things that you went through with your parents, and but kind of looking back, obviously as an adult, and looking back in that frame of time when you were born, and you said, I am quite a novelty. I love that.
Yeah, that's where I'm talking about my parents being young, and I was the first child within their group of friends to be born, and I was quite a novelty. And yeah, I think really that's really interesting you've pointed that out. I kind of, that's almost been part of the real journey for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like realizing what, and I don't mean I'm a novelty like you know, I'm so super special that there's nobody like me, but I am the only me, you know, like you're the only you, and all the listeners are the only them. You know, we are all the novelty in our own right as well, and finding the enoughness in that, and loving myself now for being that novelty, has been a real part of this journey that I've been on for the last 5 years.
And that's amazing, because the journey, part of that is the acknowledgement, and then of course the acceptance, but also moving on in a way to honor your journey, learn from it, and move forward with your life. And one thing, and when I started reading it, I also thought before I read it that it had something to do with obviously the sense of sight, your sightness. And I was correct, unfortunately.
Yep.
You went through excuse me, you were diagnosed with CNV, which is choroidal neurovascularization and I hope I pronounced that correctly, but it really is, can you explain more about that? Because I am not describing it correctly. I know it has to do with permanent loss of your sight.
So yeah, so so the C is choroidal. So choroid is all about eyes. I mean, I am not an expert, but this is what I believe to be the so choroidal means it's to do with my eye. The N is neo, which is Latin for new, and V is vascularization, which is basically a blood vessel. So what was happening, I have this funny thing that happens with my eye a lot. I think it's a migraine aura, but I've never really had it diagnosed. And I thought that's what had happened. And then it didn't go away. So I went to the eye hospital. There was a big patch about 2/5, 3/5 of my eye. I just couldn't see anything out of. This was my right eye. I went to the eye hospital and they told me that I had permanent damage to my retina because a new blood vessel had grown at the back of my eye, probably from some scar tissue that I've got there that's been there for years and years and years and years, and nobody knows why it's there. But had grown a new blood vessel from that scar tissue, which had grown into my eye and was leaking fluid onto my retina. And that's why I couldn't see, and that the damage was permanent. That is what I was told at the time. And that's what started everything coming crashing down for me.
And it did come crashing down to you in ways that a young adult, but also a child in some respects. And you even point out at what time, and I'm going to say a swear word here, folks. And just as a sidebar, I want to welcome all of our listeners on the Wisdom Audio app. I see a lot of familiar names and faces, so thank you so much for being here. You said, and quite candidly, and you were being totally honest with yourself, what the fuck am I going to do?
Yeah, sorry for the swear word, but yes, that is exactly how I felt. Because what I had realized was that I'd built what bit of self-worth I had at the time, I'd built around being, my survival strategy was people pleasing. So I had built my life around being useful and looking after everybody else and, meeting people's needs before they even realized that the need was going to arise. I was hyper vigilant and was really trying to do everything for everybody else because I felt that was the only way I would get love. I mean, that was my attempt to get love. And I realized this when I was 47 at this stage. I came to this whole realization really late in life, or quite late. And I realized that if I was going to lose the sight in my eye, and because they couldn't really work out how it had happened and why it happened, they didn't know how they were going to stop it, and they couldn't say it wasn't going to happen to the other eye. So there was, for a few weeks, a real risk that I might go blind. And I just didn't know how I was going to carry on doing all the things that I did for everybody else. And it's a very real feeling for me that I'm like, but who's going to want me around?
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
A little freeze up here. Let me just do a little bit of a reset. So bear with me for a moment here. And this is the beauty of live podcast. Hear me okay? Yeah, let me see here. Am I back? Can you hear me okay?
Oh, I can. I've lost your video now, but I can. It doesn't matter. I don't need to see you, but I can. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're not going to worry about the video as long as you can see me, of course. Okay, there I am. Whew. Hey, folks, this is the beauty of live podcasting. I always say that, but the conversation will continue. Yeah. And, as I'm looking at my notes here, and you mentioned, of course, people pleasing. And I really, as I'm reading your story, I really felt, and I wrote down to myself, she's people pleasing.
Yeah.
And then for you to, and I have that in my scribble notes here. And then
Yeah.
you, which leads me to the next thing that I want to read for everyone, because this comes at such a good time to read this. I knew I was betraying what I wanted, but I did it because I felt I had no option.
Yeah. I didn't know how to be different.
Yeah, I felt that. And from the people pleasing thing, and then, you know, everything that you went through, again, as a child to a young girl to a teen, and as soon of course, as you turn 18, boom, you were out of the house.
I couldn't wait. It was like tick, 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 please, you know, get my, you know, A levels. That's what we do here up until 18, leave and go off to university. Thank goodness, get me out of here and free. That's what I thought. I was going to be free and everything would be okay.
Right. And with that knowledge of leaving your house, like knowing that day, okay, now I'm 18, what was that? What do you recall from that moment when you walked out of the house?
So it wasn't the moment I turned 18. So I turned 18 in the February, and then in the September I went away to university. So I very clearly remember after I'd finished my A levels, I think 6 of us went on holiday to Greece for 2 weeks, which was like my first ever abroad holiday with girlfriends. And that was amazing. You know, just the freedom was just amazing. And then I spent the next 4, 5, 6 weeks getting all my stuff together to go away to university. And my mum drove me to the university that I was going to. And I remember taking all my stuff out the car and taking it to my room. And this was like, you know, this was going to be my room, and watching her drive away. And she brought my oldest friend with me as well. And I didn't know them, but apparently my mum and my oldest friend were in tears as they drove away. And I'm afraid to say, as they drove away, I'm going, yes. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe how exciting it was going. I thought it was going to be to be, and you know, be allowed to live life the way I wanted to, and not have to be, you know, oh God, hyper vigilant and worry what was going to happen next, and just, you know, be in that chaos that I'd been so used to.
Now, being that you were on your own at that time, can you look back and say at some point you were actually living your life? Like, what did that mean to you?
Well, what I soon discovered was that actually it was quite scary out in the big wide world on my own. So much as I'd hoped it was just going to be complete freedom, I realized that I didn't, I found, well, I found it quite a challenge to be in this, you know, so I was living in a hall with lots of other, there was a girls' boy, you know, a female hall attached to a male hall. And so I was, and there was a common room in between, sort of thing. Sounds quite archaic, doesn't it? But that's the way it was. And so I was surrounded, I was in a corridor, there was all these girls in these rooms, and I just didn't really have the confidence to go in and say, hi, I'm Philippa, you know, and chat and start that conversation, because I brought that feeling of being less than with me. So I actually really struggled at university, much as I thought it would be amazing. And don't get me wrong, it was so much better than being at home, but it wasn't quite what I, you know, like this, like this amazing sort of like this is where the rest of my life starts. You know, that didn't really happen then. And in fact, I don't think that happened for a long time, but it was so much better than being at home. It just came with a whole other it was a different set of anxieties then, really. How do I fit in? How do I make friends? How do I know whether people are actually my friend or not? You know, how do I live with all these other people? How do I not take it personally? How do I not try too hard? You know, it was just, yeah, I didn't thrive at university, really.
And you really shared some very candid moments of your life, and you wrote, of course, as you mentioned at the beginning, when you started to write your book, it was people that you are referring to in the book are no longer with us, and you have a sense from what I have read, and then of course I perused the rest of it, of your book, but I have a sense and a feeling that you've accepted, you've kind of came to terms with that. And based on that, do you feel in your heart and soul now that you are living your true life?
Yes. I absolutely do. I feel that, I mean, all this happened to me at 47. And I suppose I should say, in case we don't get round to it, that I did actually get most of the sight back. It turned out it wasn't permanent, and I did actually get a lot of it back, but all the unraveling had happened, had started by then. I had to have injections in my eyes for months before it was horrible, but I got most of the sight back.
Wait, sidebar here. Sidebar. Okay. So you had actual injections into your eye.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they knock you out for that?
No, and no, they didn't. And you know, my way of getting through things that aren't very pleasant is to shut my eyes and not look. You know, ideally fall asleep. You know, but you know, because they were injecting into my eye, they clamped my eye open. And you know, all I can see is this huge needle coming towards me and getting stuck in my eyeball. And then
Lord.
I can feel the fluid being put into my eyeball. The first one, I was shaking with adrenaline after the first one. It was just awful. But I think I had 6 or 7 in total. And the others weren't quite so bad, to be fair. The first one was awful.
Oh my God, I'm getting queasy just thinking about.
So what they were injecting a drug into my eye to hopefully make the blood vessels shrink, and it did. It shrank back, and most of the fluid drained out. So that worked, but it took them quite a long time to work out that they were going to do that.
Well, thank you for that. And that's so good to know. And
sorry, I made you feel queasy.
No, that's okay. You know, I'm a wimp when it comes to these kind of things. In any event, I am so glad, obviously, that you have your sight back, because yes. Furthermore, I see me. Yeah.
But you just asked me then, sorry, before I sort of
that's okay.
Went off on a, you know, I was 47 when that happened. And as a result of my breakdown, really, I went to therapy. So I finished therapy the year I turned 50. You know, I'm obviously, you know, perimenopausal at this stage as well, which I'm sure played into some of it, actually. But I turned 50 and I've never really had parties because, you know, who's going to want to come and celebrate me? And I decided to have a party, and it was just very quiet affair at home. And I remember looking around my kitchen at one point and just being really full of emotion that some of my oldest and new dearest friends were here in our house to celebrate my birthday. And that's when I really knew that I'd arrived at a place for me that I'd never been before.
Wow. Yeah. Now, I want to kind of take it a step back for a moment.
Yeah.
Kind of go back to, you shared very, very personal things. Yeah. And you presented it with grace and dignity, but I also felt as a lesson, maybe not for, it doesn't have to be specifically for what you went through, but somebody reading what you were talking about can kind of look back at it and kind of apply it to their lives. When you were writing this book, what is one thing based on just what I was chatting about, that you want the reader to feel about reading your book? Like, what do you want them to learn from your experience?
I suppose nobody's ever really asked me that question, and I know you're supposed to have that in mind when you write a book. I'm well aware that all readers are going to take something different from it, and I know people have shared with me that they've taken very different things from it. But the biggest thing I would like readers to take away is that they are enough. We are all enough, because I think there is a lot of us who don't feel that we are enough, and we are so unique and fabulous, and we are the only one who can be us. And we all have gifts, we just can't always see them, and we all have something to bring to the world, and that is kind of a big high level. That's what I would like people to take away. I think also, and I know it's easy for me to say now from the place I'm in now, but out of the darkest moments can come something amazing. Because I would not be where I am now if that hadn't happened to me. And this is the happiest I have ever been.
And you said that with such dynamic power. In your face obviously gives that all away, and that is so good to hear.
Yeah.
What do you want for Philippa, like the Philippa maybe 5 years from now?
Oh, do you know what? I've never been where do you want to be in 5 years time sort of person. I think I've always just lived very short term. But I mean, oh gosh, what would I like for Philippa? So my kids are 14 and 16 at the moment. So in 5 years time, they will hopefully be doing their own thing. I would like to have time for my husband and I, and probably the dog. I think the dog will still be here. That's what I mean. To go to have a motorhome and go and travel around the UK, the bits of the UK, because weirdly, it's not even a big country compared to, where you are, but there's a lot of it we haven't seen. And I would like to think that I would be bringing some inspiration to people to either overcome their trauma, or look at how they can improve their life, or actually look how they can be pulling back from this hustle culture that is that we're all so invested in, and how to actually tap in and tune into what they really want. Because for me, tuning into little Philippa, that spark, little Philippa is the essence, is the spark of me, and rediscovering her and reconnecting with her is what's kind of brought me alive. So delivering that in some way, I would like to be able to do.
Wow, that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I was wondering if you would pick up your book for me and go to page 346.
Oh, Anna, you've got the digital version, which might be different. Yeah, it's different.
Okay, let me see if I can pick it up on my end.
Can you tell me what chapter it's in? Sorry.
I believe it is toward the end of the book. Just bear with me a second here. I've got it up on my screen. And as I am trying to get to that, because this is pretty significant and I want to bring it up. And again, welcome to all of my amazing listeners on the Wisdom Audio app. Thank you so much for being here. Again, this is the beauty of live podcasting, and I'm scrolling through feverishly on the digital copy.
Yes, thank you for bearing with us, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate that, because this really, I was like, whoa, I got to point this out. We're almost there. We're almost there. Here we go. And Philippa, I just want, actually, it's page 340. Is it 340? Yeah. Okay, right before chapter 24. And it's a poem that you wrote.
Yeah.
And do you know which poem I am chatting about?
Yeah. So that's my found poem.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please read it for us.
Oh, okay. So this is called Found. The light is so bright, I can hardly bear it. Too many years in the dark. I've always been there, hoping and wanting, but it looked like she was never going to hear my cries. Yearning for a place in her world, to feel loved and cherished was all I ever wanted. But conditioning had taught her otherwise. To be needed and useful and pleasing was how she found her way. She lost me in that process, but it was that process, that blooming process, that brought us back together. I am found, I am home, I am loved and cherished. I am seen, I am heard. This is me.
Wow. That was such a powerful poem.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. And Philippa, do you feel at this point, I almost assume I know what the answer is. Have you found your way?
Yeah, I have. I'm still finding it. I wouldn't say I've got it all sorted and all sourced, but that's the beauty of it. I kind of don't feel like I need to know all the answers anymore, but I'm definitely, this is the best version of me I've ever been. And maybe there's a better version to come. I don't know, but yeah, sorry, simple answer. Yes.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And we have time for one person to maybe come up and ask a question or, join in the conversation, and we'll give it just another moment. Would love to have one of our listeners from Wisdom come up on the stage here. We again have time for only one person. Philippa, as we are kind of waiting for that, excuse me, to happen, and hopefully somebody will come up, but if they don't, that's okay.
Yeah.
Where can our listeners and viewers get in contact with you? And more importantly, where can they purchase the book?
So the book is self-published and it's available on Amazon. So it's available in the US, it's available everywhere on Amazon. So just search for Philippa Robinson, so 1L, PHILIPPA. Yep, so that's where to find the book. It's available on in paperback and on Kindle version. And I have a website which is safeandsupported.co.uk. There you can find out more about the book, more about me. I have a podcast as well. So you can find out much more about me if you would like to by going there. And if you do, please do click the contact button and just say hi and that you heard me here, and that would be amazing. I love hearing from people.
That is wonderful. And of course, I will make sure that all of your contact information gets in the show notes.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. This has been such an amazing conversation. I'm going to do the sign off on Wisdom, and then we'll do our formal sign off on the Stories That Inspire Us Facebook page. Again, I want to thank everybody from Wisdom being here today. And of course, the link to this podcast will also be up on my Truly Your VA website, which is on my profile page. That will be later today, but you can always also view it on Amazon Music or iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Wisdom, thank you so much for being here today, and we shall see you again real soon. Bye for now. Hey everyone, I want to thank Philippa so much for her time today in really digging deep into her book, I See Me. It is a phenomenal book written with such love and intensity, and sharing her personal story in a way that will certainly inspire you to take action in your life. And remember, if you have a story to share, that means that somebody needs to hear it and be inspired by your story. I want to thank you, Philippa, for being here today, and hope you will definitely consider coming back to the Stories podcast.
Thank you. It's been lovely. I've so enjoyed this. Thank you. And, I would love to come back sometime. So yeah, thanks very much for having me.
You are so welcome. Again, my name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us / the author series. Today, I was inspired by this amazing woman. I see me, Philippa Robinson, the author of that book. Do you see yourself? Ask yourself that question. Thank you all so much, everyone. Don't forget to go to my website, the Stories That Inspire Us website. And if you are interested in being a guest and sharing your story. Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you again real soon. Bye for now.